Hello, friends. Adam Savage here in my cave, and I am answering some questions. Q&A is the flavor of the day, and the Qs are all about Mythbusters. And Mikhail, I say Mikhail because it's spelled Mikael. Sounds like that's the proper pronunciation for that. Mikhail says, I'm in the process of turning my hobby of making into a side business, but I am scared that it won't be fun anymore because it'll be work. Any advice on how to keep it fun whilst still making a profit? This is a really good question. I'm not going to have a definitive answer to this because work is boring. All work is boring. All work, all of it. Okay, this is the thing that I say to young people asking about the history of employment. 90% of everything that you will do for work will be a boring slog. If you're really lucky, my hearing aid battery just went out. Give me a sec. So, work is boring. 90% of everything you will do for a living is a crushing slog. It's like being an adult, right? Like paying the bills, keeping track of everything. It's exhausting. It's unending, it's unceasing, and it's boring. Once we accept that, I mean, literally, I'd say 80% of the work I do in here is tedious. I mean, I get to do a lot of fun design stuff, but that's usually at the beginning, and the rest is just like cutting parts to size. And it's not like I'm not having fun, but like you're asking a really specific question. It's not going to be fun anymore because it'll be work. And the answer is it won't be fun anymore because it will be work. That will happen. But it's not quite that simple because if you could make a living doing it, you're getting bored on your own time. You're not getting bored for someone else's company. And that right there is a real sweet feeling. I can tolerate a lot when I'm making my own living, as opposed to the way I'd like a job to be when I'm working for other people. So this is like you want to take a side thing that you've been doing and turn it into a side hustle and turn it into a viable business. The relationship you have to that kind of work will change. You're going to get much better at it. You're going to get much more efficient at it. You're going to keep finding those efficiencies because they make you money. And you're going to start building a bunch of institutional knowledge about a very different kind of making, because making for money is very different than making when there's nothing at stake. They're just very different. And I fully support this. The idea of taking your like side excitement and making a living with it is fantastic. You can't expect it to give you the same things it was giving you when you were just doing it for your own pleasure. And that's why we do all of our stuff. So how do I say this? There's a subtlety here that I want to get to, and it is about the fact of how much we change over our lives. So okay, I'm going to let's say that your side hustle that you want to turn into a business is customizing Sharpies. Let's say you've customized a ton of Sharpies for everyone you know, and they've all said, man, you should make this into a product. And you're like, yeah, again. And you start to sell it, and you're starting to pay rent with your customized Sharpies. Now, the doing of it is like, it's this drudgery you've got to get past in order to like pay your rent. So there's a certain amount of every day spent customizing Sharpies for the dollar. The reason you started customizing Sharpies wasn't because you thought it would make you money. It was like you learned this thing that you were, again, this is just a theoretical task, but I'm using this as the guide. The reason you started customizing Sharpies is just because you wanted to. And then you got good at it and you found you had this niche and like nobody else could do it in the way that you were doing it. And people started to tell you they could pay you to do it. And so now maybe you could turn this into a business. And while you were learning that you could do this and you were finding an aesthetic point of view that was uniquely yours, You got a lot out of that process. Whether or not you turn that into a business, the enjoyment you get from that thing is going to change, and it's going to diminish over time. I think that's a universal human truth. I say that as a generalist. I've known people who spent their whole lives painting the same painting. Paul Resica, oh my God, an amazing painter, painted like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paintings of this red barn near his house. This is like a creative output I don't understand, but like it's not mine. I mean, it's not to say I don't understand it. It's just not the way I do things. I think I'm more like a Rauschenberg. I'm not comparing myself to Robert Rauschenberg, but I'm saying, like, as a generalist who tries a whole bunch of different things, Rauschenberg is a generalist's like patron saint. Robert Rauschenberg, pop artist of the 50s and the 60s, super important American artist. So whether or not you turn your side hustle of I don't like saying side hustle. I don't like hustle culture. It's distasteful to me. It's a longer story. Your side business of customizing Sharpies, whether you turn it into a business, the enjoyment of that is going to go down. And you should just expect that. In my experience, when you get really good at something and you keep on doing it, it loses its luster after a while, and you start wanting to crave the novel. I mean, and that is what humans do. We crave the novel experience. It's why we eat so many different things. It's why we travel to so many corners of the world. It's part of what makes us explorers. Okay, so I think I've covered that like it will stop being fun to do it as a business, but that doesn't mean it's not going to give you a lot of enjoyment, because you'll be making money on your own sweat equity and with your own hands. And that is a really sweet living to make. It is the first time you get a paycheck that's yours because of something you made. It's unparalleled bit of enjoyment. I seriously, I strongly recommend it. You're also going to have to get used to all the aspects of the business. And again, those will... I think I'm saying the same thing repeatedly. The advice that I want to give you is, don't look to the thing that you're turning into a business for your creative fulfillment. You're going to have to keep looking elsewhere, just as you were always going to do throughout your whole life. Milton Glaser, the totally amazing graphic designer, saying graphic designer doesn't even cover it. Milton Glaser is an artist and like significantly responsible for the way you think of the 60s and how they looked. Like, Milton Glaser is responsible for that. He has a beautiful video. He died a few years ago, but he had has a beautiful video online, and I'll try and find the link so we can put it in the comments, talking about how success will cause more people to come to you and ask you to do the thing that you got successful at. And they'll ask you to keep on doing it. And the problem with that is, the more you do the thing you got successful at, the less enjoyment you're going to get from it, because you're raking over the same old territory. However, once you've gotten successful at something, stopping doing that becomes terrifying, because if it made you a living and you got successful at doing it, well, moving on to the next thing is an unknown. It's kind of like having a TV show for a long time and then it goes away, and what do you do now? Here I am. I'm a YouTuber. I went all the way from being a television guy to a YouTuber. I never expected that was going to happen. But at the end of this video, Glaser says, you've got to embrace the thing you don't know. You've got to embrace that fear and that unknown if you're going to keep progressing creatively and keep searching in yourself for the point of view that you converse with your culture about. Keeping it fun. You asked specifically how to keep it fun. When I'm doing work on the clock here and I'm up against a deadline, I remind myself that my time is my own. And that even though I'm sitting here doing this thing that I find tedious, and I might be wishing I would be rather having a sandwich and like sitting on my deck than making this thing, I remind myself, like, I'm still doing this on my behalf, under my control. And that is a lovely frame. I find that a very self-reinforcing, invigorating, and creatively useful frame. don't be afraid to raise your prices. Don't be afraid to raise your prices. One thing that can happen is you may find that you make a thing that people want and you get so tired of making it, you think, I really don't want to make any more of these. And then you'll think to yourself, wait a minute, if someone came to me with a whole bunch of dough, I'd certainly find the motivation to make another one of these. And that's when you should be raising your price. Like, at a certain point, the price of something is a bribe to get you to go through the discomfort of making that thing. Seriously, that is absolutely, like, sometimes that is part of the cost factor of like, yeah, no, this is what it costs to get me to get off my butt and do this thing. Oh, there's so much in this. Self-employment is really difficult. All the things that are difficult about adulthood in general, bill tracking and paying stuff on time and making sure you know what you're spending and where it's going. Self-employment is like that times 10, and it can be awful. You're definitely going to want a custom tax preparer. You don't want to do your own. As soon as you're self-employed, I strongly recommend you have someone else do your taxes, and that you start looking at efficiencies for things you can deduct because they're part of the business, and ways to adjust your finances because you're self-employed. We have a tax system that tends to punish the lower end of the self-employed. Yeah, it's problematic, but it's the reality. You know, so many times I finish these questions feeling like I just rambled for 11 minutes and 52 seconds. Mikhail, the best of luck to you. I hope some of what I've said here is useful. As much as I'm telling you, you will lose the enjoyment of the thing you're making. It makes me so excited to think of you taking this interest and turning it into an income. Because it will help you with every other thing that you feel like turning into an income. One of the things I spend a lot of time doing when I'm prognosticating about the future, and this is something I recommend to do, whether or not you are going to be self-employed or employed by someone else, or however you're going to apply your skills, I think a lot about how I want things to feel instead of how I want them to be. Because how I want them to feel will inform how I want them to be. So, you know, every now and then I check in with myself and I think about the time I spend at the shop versus the time I spend at home, the time I spend doing work versus the time I spend with my partner. And we check in and we adjust the values of all of those parts of the equation based on that, based on the life we want to live. There's been times when I've traveled away from home for too long, and like when I come back, we had discussions about like, yeah, that was too long for both of us. So, okay, there's a maximum amount of time. Like knowing each of these things and how they quantify the quality of your life, because that's really ultimately the question that you're asking. You're asking, how do I do this big step in my life and still maintain a quality that feels creatively invigorating? You just got to keep asking that question. How do I want things to be? The other main question you keep on asking as a freelancer, it turns out, is what's next? Because when your time is your own, but so is your income, it doesn't matter how much you just made from the job you just did. Rent's still coming out of that bank account every month. All your expenses are still having to get paid. So I had a job that once paid me 6 months rent in one shot. I didn't relax for a second. It was like still time to keep on making money because the dry spells, I mean, I had a dry spell in the middle of working for Industrial Light and Magic that lasted 8.5 months. I spent that whole time looking for work, getting small jobs here and there. But yeah, it's a full-time job being self-employed. And what's next? You never stop thinking that. I love that frame of thinking. I personally love it. It's not necessarily for everybody, which is totally fine. I've also had magnificent times working for other people. Okay, I don't have a pithy wrap up for this. Mikhail, thanks for the great question. Tested patrons, thank you for all of the great questions. And if you want to know any more information about being a tested patron, it's in the comments below. Thank you guys so much. Stay safe, stay cool, and I will see you next time.